Hello, listeners. This is Kat. Welcome back to Put Your Hands Up Podfics. This will be the continuation of All For You. This will be part 16, day 33, 31 weeks. Izuku was crying. That was fine. That was good. Babies should cry. They need to cry to strengthen their lungs and voice their opinions. But the little whimpers and tiny cries Izuku made through routine care hurt enough. Listening to his son wail as hard as he could felt like his heart was getting ripped out of his chest and stomped into the dirt. He'd always hated seeing Yoichi and Inko upset too, but while that had hurt, it hadn't at least felt like a physical blow to his exposed and beating heart. He didn't sound like a normal baby. He certainly didn't sound anything like Katsuki, who he had gotten an earful of after Mitsuki sent a recording of him screaming like a banshee at night, accompanied with a message, "Got any quirks that let you sleep through this?" He had generously offered one of his spare stamina quirks, only for her to clarify it was a joke. Izuku sounded a little more like a kitten, or maybe a lamb when his cries were particularly strong. His cry was so high-pitched and warbling, the sound giving out like a squeaky toy toward the end of his wails, even as he relentlessly hiccuped and cried and cried and cried. "Please, Izuku," Hisashi begged softly, Izuku's tiny hand held gently between two fingers, which was quickly pulled away, again, so he could flail in his upset. "Please calm down. I promise everything is okay." His reassurances didn't seem to make any difference. Hisashi looked up, checking all the monitors for the upteenth time. Nothing had changed. Izuku was perfectly fine. Yet since his last nurse checkup, during which he mostly was in the shower, Izuku had not stopped crying. He didn't have the faintest idea why. Izuku hadn't gotten a needle stick, or had his diaper changed, or got a bath. None of the things that normally made him upset had happened. The only thing that had changed was a CPAP mask. But that shouldn't hurt, so it couldn't be making him cry, right? Hisashi pulled his hand out of the incubator, since Izuku clearly wasn't interested in holding hands at the moment. He didn't want him to get cold or lose humidity for no reason. Still, Hisashi looked back and forth between his wailing son and the door. He had no idea what to do. Izuku continued to cry. Hisashi ran a hand through his hair. He couldn't just sit here and do nothing. The nurse's station was just outside the door. All he had to do was just go ask if something was wrong. He would barely be gone a minute. Izuku probably wouldn't even notice. Hisashi turned to look at Izuku again. His little face was scrunched up and red as he wailed his broken little heart out. His throat must hurt at this point. Hisashi clenched his fists and forced himself up. He had to. Refraining from asking a simple question at this point would be cowardice. It still hurt to walk away. The door creaked as he opened it, blinking his eyes in the sudden brightness. Izuku's room was always kept dim. He left the door cracked open as he made his way to the nurse's station. Izuku's cries could be heard distantly. His lungs weren't very strong, but he sure was trying. Shinso looked up from his computer, nodding at him. "Something I can help you with, Midoriya-san?" Hisashi nodded and gestured toward his son's room. "Izuku has not stopped crying since the last nurse checked on him. I don't believe he's had any painful procedures, and his vital signs are perfectly fine. The only thing that's changed is the CPAP mask. I tried to calm him down, but—" He gestured toward the room where Izuku was definitely still crying. Shinso listened carefully, propping his head up on his hands. "But what?" he asked. "Well, I don't know why he's crying, or what to do," Hisashi said, looking between Shinso and Izuku's room. Inko would have known what to do. She had been a natural at comforting softness, but he had never paid attention to the what or the how or the why of what she did, because he had stupidly assumed she'd always be there. "Yeah, I think it's because of the mask," Shinso said. "The CPAP mask?" Hisashi asked. "But that shouldn't hurt him, so why—" "It doesn't have to hurt for him to not like it," Shinso said, shooting him a quick grin. "It feels funny and different, and he just doesn't like it. He's an opinionated little tater-tot." Tater-tot. Izuku was a little tater-tot. Inko would have loved that nickname. Hisashi shook his head, dispelling the thought. "Well then, it's an easy fix, right?" Hisashi asked. "We can change the mask back to the one he prefers." "Afraid not, Midoriya-san," Shinso said apologetically. Hisashi blinked, his stomach twisted. "Why not?" "Unfortunately, we have to change the mask up every so often, otherwise the littles will get sores from the mask constantly rubbing the same spot," Shinso said. "Oh," Hisashi said. Every time he thought he had a handle on what to do in this place, the carpet was pulled out from underneath him again. "You'll just have to help him calm down," Shinso replied. "But," Hizashi protested, his stomach sinking lower. "I can't do that." Shinso sighed, getting up and walking over to him. He wasn't sure what he expected, maybe for him to enter Izuku's room and calm him down, since Hizashi couldn't. But he had certainly not expected him to start pushing him back into the room. "Shinso," Hizashi said, not budging. "I can't calm him down, I'm not—" "God, you're heavy," Shinso muttered before speaking up. "Sure you can. You're Dad." Hizashi shuffled forward, taken off guard. "Now, come on, big guy. Get in there and do your job," Shinso said, giving him a final push into Izuku's room. "I'm not Inko," Hizashi thought desperately as the door closed behind him. There was nothing but the sound of the monitors and Izuku's relentless crying. He had only gotten louder in the minute or two he was gone. Was the mask really bothering him that much? Hizashi slowly shuffled closer to Izuku. He supposed he should try again to calm him down. But he had already tried, and it had done nothing. He just wasn't good at this. But he supposed he had to try again. Hizashi washed his hands and sat back down in his chair, quietly opening up the incubator while Izuku wailed. He gently pushed his fingertip against Izuku's palm, but he didn't grab on. He cupped Izuku's head and legs, but Izuku pushed him away. Those were the only things he knew to do. It wasn't as if he could pick Izuku up and rock him to sleep. He wasn't there yet. Hizashi took one hand out, leaving the other in a loose fist next to Izuku. Izuku was clearly uninterested in touch right now, but perhaps if he left the porthole open, Izuku would be able to hear him better. Not that his voice had helped either. "I'm sorry you don't like the new mask," Hizashi started, trying to keep his voice as soft and soothing as possible. "It must be very uncomfortable, or at least very odd, to upset you this much. I did try to ask if they could give you the other mask back, but, they said it would be bad for you." Izuku just kept crying. Hizashi shifted, anxiety pulling in his gut. It wasn't working. "I know you dislike it, Izuku, but please," Hizashi tried. "Please try to calm down. It will be okay. You will be okay. You're safe here, Izuku." Izuku still kept crying. If he was an optimist, he might be able to say that Izuku's cries had quieted a little bit, but did it really matter if he was still crying? It was just proof he wasn't good enough at this. Hizashi turned his gaze inward, rifling through his quirk collection and humming lullabies absent-mindedly. His healing repertoire had been lackluster, at least when it came to safe quirks to use on an infant that already slept 99% of the day away. But surely he had something that could calm his son down, at least a little. His throat must hurt at this point. Izuku had already been through so much agony at an age when he shouldn't even know what pain is. He didn't want his tiny infant son to face any more pain than he already had. It was wildly unfair that his premature 1-month-old had experienced more painful procedures than Hizashi had experienced in nearly 2 centuries. He lost track of time as he looked. He had thousands of quirks, hundreds of them, strong quirks that synergized well and made him the feared, powerful symbol of evil he was, all of which were completely and utterly useless to the one person he wanted to help right now. The rest were weak, unwanted quirks he had received via deals for allies or power grabs, or that he had just grabbed on impulse. He felt a little like he was digging through garbage in his desperate effort to find something that would help Izuku right now. Finally, after far too long, he dug something out of the dregs of his collection. It was a trust quirk. Very simple mode of action. It made people feel like the user was trustworthy. He'd used it, maybe once or twice, for manipulation, when his natural charisma didn't do the trick. Usually it was forgotten about, though. Hizashi turned the quirk over in his head. But Izuku was his son. Shouldn't he already trust him? Could Izuku trust him? As far as he knew about babies, which he was discovering wasn't much, the only person they implicitly trusted was their mother, and Hizashi was not Inko. Could Izuku trust him without comprehending what trust was? He was far too young to understand the concept, and teaching it to him was years off. Would using this quirk hurt Izuku? None of the staff had used their quirks on the babies, not even Reiki-san, who had told him in passing that she had a healing quirk. He had been tempted to take it. But he needed her to take care of his son, and that was more important than taking a quirk that might not even help him. Izuku's hand hit his own, tiny fingers trying to grab on. It took everything in him to not jump or pull his hand away as he was jolted out of his thoughts. Hizashi quickly put his fingertips into Izuku's surging hand and his son's tiny hand wrapped around his fingertip. He looked up after scanning Izuku's little body to all of his monitors for anything that may have gone wrong until it hit him. Izuku had stopped crying. Izuku was still whimpering, still clearly unhappy, but all he had done was hum. Was his voice really all Izuku needed? All he wanted to hear when he was uncomfortable or in pain or unhappy? It was such a simple solution. It seemed so easy. Too easy, but then... Izuku perked up when he spoke to him in the mornings, wiggling and opening his eyes at the sound of Izashi's voice. Izuku calmed down at the sound of Izashi's voice whenever the nurses or doctors or therapists had to do something unpleasant that hurt. Izuku suckled on the PAL machine whenever Hisashi had to leave for those meetings. Izuku listened to him and Inko all day long until he came back. His throat threatened to close up, thick with emotion. His eyes stung, vision blurring slightly, but he kept humming, and slowly Izuku stopped whimpering, stopped wriggling, and slipped into slumber. All right, listeners, this concludes day 33 of All For You. Day 34 will be up next. Hope you all are still enjoying, and as always, thank you so much for listening.